Next point on the agenda is the Commission statement on the situation in Moldova. I would like to ask the Commissioner Christos Stylianides to speak on behalf of the European Commission.
Thank you, Chairman. On behalf of my dear colleague, Commissioner Hahn, thank you for this opportunity to exchange views on the situation in Moldova. Both Federica Mogherini and Johannes Hahn are very closely monitoring the situation with a particular focus on the reforms and political developments. In our partnership with Moldova, we have always tried to support change when it could bring tangible benefits to the people of Moldova. And let me recall that in the very first lines of our association agreement, the European Union and Moldova commit to some common principles. Among them are the rule of law, good governance and cooperation between neighbours. These are not only EU values, these are European values that are part of our common heritage and are shared by all members of the Council of Europe. The Council conclusions of 15 February 2016 already include a broad set of reforms that we believe will help Moldova meet its full potential, making both its democracy and its economy stronger. On 13 March, we published our first association implementation report, which has identified issues to be addressed as a matter of priority. On 31 March, the Association Council was the opportunity to discuss the progress in the reforms in all fields. We have to acknowledge that the government and the parliament have taken many legislative steps, particularly last year. The reform process has finally been restarted after political instability had brought it to a deadlock. Some efforts have been made in the banking sector and have contributed to restoring macro-financial stability and donors' assistance. An agreement with the International Monetary Fund was reached in November 2016. Thanks to that, we could resume our budget support based on a thorough assessment of whether the conditions foreseen by the existing assistance programmes to Moldova had been fulfilled. It also allowed us to propose a macro-financial assistance operation for Moldova. In the justice and energy sectors, in the fight against corruption, as well as the public administration reforms, some legislative and regulatory steps have been already taken. However, many of the country's key problems still persist. Politicisation of state institutions, corruption, independence of the judiciary, much delayed investigations on banking frauds. As you all know, on 5 May, the Parliament adopted 2 draft laws in the first reading that might lead to important changes in the Moldovan political system. One, as tabled by the Democratic Party, which would change the electoral system from proportional to nominal, and a second, as proposed by President Dodon, in favour of a mixed electoral system, half proportional and half uninominal. These 2 proposals have now been merged. A new draft was produced on the basis of President Dodon's proposals for review by the Venice Commission. It is expected that the Venice Commission, which has just visited Moldova, will give its opinion by mid-June. Let us be very clear on this proposed reform. It is not up to the European Union to decide upon an independent country's voting system. This should be up to the people of Moldova, and we mean all of them, not only the parties in power. Any change to the electoral system should be based on a broad consensus amongst political forces, on the broadest consensus among all political forces and within society. A new electoral law can have a significant impact on the quality of a country's democracy, for better or worse. The Council of Europe has an important advisory role when it comes to democratic reforms, so we can only hope that Moldova will listen carefully to the opinion of the Venice Commission. On our side, our economic support is aimed at accompanying reforms that can benefit the citizens of Moldova. With the association agreement, we have set out, together with our Moldovan friends, the goals of our partnership. Our financial support intends precisely to favour the implementation of the association agreement. As far as the macro-financial assistance is concerned, the adoption of the decision does not mean its immediate implementation. Each disbursement, including the first one, is conditional to the implementation of policy measures set out in the related Memorandum of Understanding. Real accountability for elected officials is essential to the credibility of all democratic institutions. Moldova has so far taken some steps toward a stronger democracy. The European Union will work to help Moldova stay on the path of a democracy that truly delivers on its citizens' needs. Thank you so much for your attention, and I look forward to hearing your intervention and your suggestion about the situation in Moldova. Thank you so much.
Dziękuję bardzo, panie komisarzu.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, for your speech. We are very pressed for time, so I'm going to ask you to keep to your speaking time. Now, political groups are going to take the floor. On behalf of EPP, Mr. Preda can speak for 1 minute and a half.
Thank you, President. I am against granting financial assistance to Moldova because we simply do not know where this money would go. In Chișinău, everybody knows that 1 billion was stolen, but nobody is held responsible simply because justice does not work. In fact, it is not citizens who would benefit from European help, but the stealing elites. The only argument that Chișinău brought in favor of this assistance is having a pro-European government. This is false. The government is not controlled by parliament, but by Mr. Plahotniuc, an oligarch, a mogul, who simply buys members of parliament one by one, especially among the communists. The president of the country, Mr. Dodon, is quite a character. He is the only socialist who is at the left of the communists and who is completely subservient to the interests of Moscow. He wants to impose an election system that leads to a bipartisan system that allows the parties of the two people I've just quoted, Dodon and Plahotniuc, to hold power. So in Chișinău, there is a mogul in charge who cooperates with a servant of Putin. This is the reality on the spot. Under these circumstances, and considering that the freedom of the press is simply trampled underfoot, and the liberty of the press is just word. Well, we have to be extra careful. That is what we have to do right now.
On behalf of SND Group, Deputy Andy Krista, Feminist please.
Thank you, President, dear Commissioner, dear colleagues. If the Republic of Moldova is on the agenda of our plenary session today, it is because this country is at the top of the European Parliament's priorities, and Moldova has the support and commitment of all political groups across this Parliament on its European path. I want to acknowledge the reform efforts and ambitions of the Moldovan people and the authorities, and to convey a strong signal of support and encouragement at this important time, especially in relation to the positive impact of the current process of political association and economic integration. It is clear that, although some areas require additional efforts, overall there has been substantial progress since the start of the executive mandate. This week, this House will approve its mandate for the start of negotiations with the Council and the Commission for EU macrofinancial assistance to the Republic of Moldova. This assistance will be a sign of recognition of the renewed commitment to moving forward with necessary reforms and to addressing the country's challenges by the current executive. In this regard, I wish to underline that we will be applying rigorous, clear and strict conditionality criteria for the disbursement, and this conditionality will be attached to every disbursement of each tranche, including the first one. Dear colleagues, the Parliament has been most effective and successful when it has acted with full consensus on its line vis-à-vis the Republic of Moldova. The divisions and tensions amongst political parties in Chișinău are more and more reflected within the European Parliament and its political groups. I want to be very clear. I want to be crystal clear. This is not a positive development. As European Parliament, we can only be effective if we are united and not politicized, if we have a strong, objective and institutional line instead of expressing our positions through the prism of our respective political partners in Chișinău. And I want to personally thank all colleagues for their constructiveness and for the constructive approach in this crucial period. And I would like to mention Cristian Preda and Petra Sostrevicius. Thank you so much. Colleagues, we are of course following closely the ongoing process of electoral reform. Next week, the EU-Moldova Parliamentary Committee and the Euronest Parliamentary Assembly will meet in Chișinău. This will be an opportunity for the European Parliament to meet its Moldovan counterpart while we await the opinion of the Venice Commission on the draft law. Thank you so much.
Dziękuję bardzo także.
Thank you very much. Thank you also for sticking to time limits. And now, on behalf of ECR, Anna Fotyga, 1.5 minutes.
Media and political pluralism, quality journalism, combating corruption and Russian propaganda are the best ways to ensure the European direction of Moldova. A clear signal should be sent by us to Chișinău, and as soon as possible, that urgent action in all these areas is needed and prerequisite of our further financial support to this country. Unfortunately, the situation is very grave, and there is much disinformation in the country. Taking into account the fatigue of society, its disbelief in authorities, we have to take our responsibility to really enhance the democratic consolidation of Moldova. Thank you.
Bardzo dziękuję pani.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much also for sticking to your time.
Deputy Petras Austrevicius, 2 minutes, take a floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner, As a standing rapporteur on implementation of the EU-Moldova Association Agreement, I will speak in a very frank and sincere way. I do so as I feel a very high responsibility for where Moldova is heading to, as it soon might become crucial and hardly reversible. Today, it's time to pronounce Quo Vadis, Moldova. Being a rapporteur, I must admit, I am lately not that sure of how seriously a status of EU-associated partner is perceived by the Moldovan authorities. This partnership is not at all abstract. It means certain obligations and deliverables, not only yet another credit line being opened. By partnership, we expect, first and foremost, that a certain European-style political culture is to prevail in Moldova. In Europe, free and independent media is in the interest of everyone, as openness and difference of opinions is a catalyst of change and public discourse. In Europe, the election laws are designed to ensure a fair competition of people's minds and not to create privileges for some and eliminate others. In Europe, justice is what everyone has the right to. There must be no place for selective trials behind the closed doors. I therefore want to appeal to the Moldovan government as follows. Do not be misled with a wrong assumption that Brussels is big, blind, far away and always ready to sign another cheque. Instead of calling yourself a European coalition name, come up with the real deeds, real change handled in a European way. We expect from you, Moldova. Thank you.
Ačiū. Thank you. On behalf of the NGL Group, Deputy Helmut Scholz, 1.5 minutes. Please.
Herr Präsident.
Thank you, President. Commissioner. Unfortunately, in the European Parliament, despite the debates today, we still have not had a contradiction resolved. We want to give Moldova access to EU monies, but we have been hearing about the bank scandal. That's not been clarified. The President is talking about money ending up in the pockets of corrupt elites and arbitrary justice, and we're still doing both things. I've been to Moldova, and I listened to people in our eastern neighbourhood. This is a transformation process, but adaptable oligarchs like Plahotniuc have been following what's been said in the EU and in Russia, and they've been learning from those around them. They've been learning from the playbook of a party like Popolo della Libertà, how to hang on to power. And the problems, I think, start in the EU capitals and they only end in Chisinau. And this has been, we have seen the cancellation of the trilogue on macro-financial assistance to Moldova. And it's as if we're getting obnubilated by the procedures. The EPP and the S&D are not the alternative because they have both got friendly parties in the Moldovan government. We've got clear demands. We need precise and practical conditionalities for EU money. We need to say exactly what Moldova has got to do, and we must not hide behind lofty definitions. We must have the immediate end of trials against political opponents. Thank you very much.
Vielen Dank. On behalf of Rebecca Harms, 2 minutes, please.
Vielen Dank. Ich will
Thank you very much. First of all, I should like to say that I think it is excellent that we have this discussion here today, that in a week's time we shall be able to continue in Chisinau. We have our delegation there, and we have the board meeting of the Euronet Parliamentary Assembly, which is going to give us the possibility to discuss this further. First of all, I should like to refer to something which has certainly struck Germany and elsewhere, the fact that when we talk about President Dodon, half of the money which has gone from Brussels to Moldova over the past 10 years seems to have leaked into the pockets of others and disappeared. I noted that President Dodon in this year also was participating in the region, but up until today we haven't managed to get into the details of where that money which disappeared, which came from Brussels, has actually gone to. So I wonder whether we should continue to pay monies to a country which has a president which seems to play a part in the seeping away of money into corrupt pockets and in fact should be responsible for that money. I think that in these transformation countries, these countries which are moving towards the West, and have a partnership with us, should ensure that there is a proper mechanism in place to combat corruption. So we've been told that the President has been requested that we've requested the President to be tougher about this. This is something which we do need to ensure happens, and as some speakers have said, there has been progress in legislation in Chisinau, but when it's a question of implementation of a reform of the justice system, this is not happening, and the same applies to the administrative reform and for all structures which have been created to combat corruption. But, as I said, it's not happening in Chisinau. Thank you very much. Mrs. Harms.
EFDD Group, Deputy Fabio Massimo Castaldo, 1 minute, please.
Grazie, Presidente. La Moldavia.
Thank you very much, Chair. Moldova remains one of the most corrupt and poorest countries in Europe. You all are aware of the anti-government protests and the subsequent banking scandal which saw millions of dollars disappear. Now, the people are really protesting against the government, and this is because there is dreadful corruption, there's repression of freedom of expression, there's a repression of voices which are calling for transparency and freedom. Now, there was a first reading of a new bill in 2017 to counter public protests if necessary. The Venice Commission is something which has been involved in this, and within that context we have to really denounce what is happening. We've seen that people are able to control the government through the legal system and also control the media. As principal partners of Moldova, we should use the instruments in our power to do something about this. Thousands of euros are disappearing. We don't know where in Moldova, and until there has been a change in the way in which Moldova works, we really can't place our confidence in that country anymore.
And now Mr. Korwin-Mikke.
Ja nie tylko byłem niedawno w Mołdawii, ale byłem kilka razy.
I was recently in Moldova. I've been there several times already, actually. I have relatives in the higher echelons of society, in fact, and I can say that this mentality is somewhat of a challenge, and many people claim that the only salvation to bring order to the country would be Putin. Every euro transferred from Romania somehow disappears into a vacuum. Now, most attempts to solve this end in rather gloomy outcomes, and at the end of the day people don't want this anymore, and it's only natural. It's a question of ethics and moral. It's the question of those people giving money, ensuring that there is development in the country, and that's not the politicians who are going to do it. Thank you.
deputat Jean Marinescu.
Mr. Marinescu has the floor now.
Mulțumesc, domnule președinte. Moldova este un stat european.
Thank you very much, President. Moldova is a European state. It's a very important state in terms of geopolitics, and this is something that we have seen where Russia wants to impose their own viewpoint on that country. Recently, the Moldovan government has made efforts to get closer to the European Union. Politicians may have different opinions, however. They want to converge. They might do that towards the EU or towards Russia. What we need to do is get them on the EU track. We must continue to implement the agreement, as we must continue to monitor the country. And we must also make sure that the electoral laws are in line with the social realities of the country. Of course, when we give aid to a country, we must make sure that any problems with rule of law or the judiciary are kept in check. And then, of course, we need to encourage them as well. Refusing aid to Moldova will only bring it closer to Russia. Moldova must have our aid and the monitoring of that aid.
Mulțumesc. Następny mówca to pan poseł Francisco Assis.
Our next speaker is Mr. Assis.
Presidente, Sr. Comissário, infelizmente temos.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Commissioner. Unfortunately, we've seen that in some Eastern European countries, the tragedy of communism came before other tragedies, and this is the case of Moldova. Now, I'll go back to what the previous speaker said, that Moldova is a European country. It's the poorest country in Europe, and since the beginning of the century, the Moldovan economy has made steps forward, and then after some time, the World Bank comes along and says that they are still making progress. Now we have visa exoneration for the Moldovan. 3.5 million people can move freely around the Schengen area, so we are thereby favouring trade relations with other European countries. Although, recently, some people have raised doubts about this approach and encouraging Moldovans to come closer to Russia. The Russians are also bringing pressure to bear on the people of Moldova, which isn't helping the situation. Of late, Russia estimated that from the social and economic point of view, its links were very close with those of Moldova. And there's energy supply, which is considerable. For now, we are at a decisive crossroads for this country, which is, as I said before, the poorest in Europe, although they're part of our European culture and civilization. Despite all the problems and all the mistakes that have been made, I do not think that the European Union should give up on encouraging Moldova to try and resolve their serious problems and continue with the process of democratization, to make necessary reforms in the economy and the social sphere. The worst thing that could happen to a country like this would be for the European Union to abandon them, and I'm sure this is not going to happen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Assis. We now have Madam McAvey for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, President. In a country with a solid democracy, the system of a mixed nominal vote would work. But in Moldova, where the large majority of the population is poor, there are only 5% of those who are wealthy, and it's very obvious that the wealthy will buy, if you will, the institutions of the country. We get more and more information about Russia. Russia taking more of a position there, and we can see that through certain oligarchies like Platoniuk. The European Union has invested a lot in this country as of 2014. We've built roads, schools, hospitals. We've invested in public administration and its reform. And many other areas have been financed by the European Union. All of this is very good, and we're very pleased about this, but the Republic of Moldova must make real reforms. We would like to continue with those reforms. They would like to combat corruption. But in reality, this is something that needs to happen. It's not something that should just be left on paper. There are problems linked with the government, with money laundering, the billions that have just disappeared. Moldova is a European country, and we need to keep it close by, in the fold, as it were.
Thank you very much, Mrs. McAvoy. Ms. Nicolai, for a minute.
Nicolai.
Madam Nicolai.
Domnule președinte, dezbaterea de astăzi este.
Now, in today's debate, a number of questions are raised. Questions for the European Union, for us. If we wish to continue to support the European road which Moldova is taking, we do have to realize that reforms are often monopolized or ambiguous, but nevertheless the Chisinau government has demonstrated a clear commitment to Europe. I think that we should ensure that our discussion is not seen as a black and white debate. We need to focus on the Moldovan citizens rather than the ruling classes. Because if we wish the population to have a real opportunity within Europe, we have to be tough. We shouldn't be suspending aid to Moldova. The aid is necessary, and the Moldovan population, as simple as they may be, as easy to manipulate as they may be, should have the opportunity to become real European citizens. If we wish Moldova to join us, we should ensure we respect that. Thank you very much, Mrs. Nicolai. Colleague Soltis for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Of course, the Republic of Moldova can be seen from different angles. Through the glasses of the people on the governing side or the opposition, or those who are somewhere in the middle. Now, from the government side, we've been hearing about the state of affairs and concerns expressed by the rapporteur with regard to reforms. We're not talking here about political or economic reforms, although they are very important for this country, but I'm mainly thinking about the election system and the constitution, which can really change the structure, the political landscape of the country. Now, I agree, and this has been pointed out, that the Republic of Moldova should receive assistance financially, and it should be assisted in implementing a number of reforms. However, we have concerns that must be expressed with regard to freedom of the press and the judiciary, and with regard to property rights and so on. And the last presidential elections really showed that we are far removed from the standards that we tend to encourage here in the European Union. There's a long way to go, and I think the Republic of Moldova deserves our cooperation and our assistance. But of course, we have to be very rigid with regard to supervision and in being absolutely certain that we know where the money is going.
Thank you very much, Mr. Soltis. Mr. Boni, for 1.5 minutes.
Wydawała się liderem w regionie, otwartym na
Thank you very much. Now, we do have to realize that Moldova is often quite open to us and can be seen as a leader in the region. Naturally, moving towards democracy can entail very difficult tasks. But what is really important is that our policy towards Moldova supports this fledgling democracy. Of course, there are a lot of risks relating to freedom of opinion and independence of the media, something which is very important in order to ensure that the people can achieve their aspirations. When we're looking at the country and its oligarchs, this is something else that we need to deal with. It's a very important task. So I do think we need to look into what is happening in much greater detail. Now, it's important that Moldova moves along the road towards European values, and we need to solve the problems, and we hope we shall be able to do so in such a way as to ensure that European values are reflected in the new election laws. Coming back to the Venice Commission comments, I think this is also very important when we're looking at this new election. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed for Moldova. Thank you very much, Mr. Boni. Ms. Fransulika, for 1 minute.
Comisar, stimați colegi,
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Our colleague said, quo vadis, Moldova. And I think that what we should say, in all due respect, is that we, the European Union, the European Parliament, must make sure that that country moves towards the European Union and towards its values rather than moving towards the East, rather than moving towards Eurasia, which is what Mr. Dodon aims to do. And that would make him into a head of state which unfortunately supports others and acts against his own citizens. The place of the Republic of Moldova is one which belongs side by side with the European Union. And so we must not put an end to the financial assistance that we provide to that country, because in so doing, the European Union will lose all of its influence.
Thank you much, Mr. Fransulika. Thank you very much, Mr. Fransulika. Mr. Kurczuk, for a minute.
Комисар, колеги, Молдова е част от източното.
Thank you, Mr. President. Commissioner, colleagues, Moldova is part of the Eastern Partnership and wants to strengthen its association and economic integration with the European Union, but unfortunately it still faces very serious problems before it can join the EU. The various political problems have not been resolved in the long term, and they haven't resolved long-term problems, corruption, the silencing of the press, and all sorts of other issues that affect civil society, issues concerning security as well. And we would like reforms to be brought through by the state as laid down in the 2014 association agreement. The EU could bring political and financial assistance to the country, provided that the powers that be in Moldova follow democratic values. It is important that we take into account the security issues and well-being of the whole region. Democratic principles must be abided by, and the rights of the citizens as well, to ensure the future of this democracy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kurczuk. Mr. Rope, for 1 minute.
Herr Kollege Roppe.
Mr. Rope.
Er ist nicht da, dann folgt Herr.
He's not there, so for 1.5 minutes, Mr. Kovachev.
Молдова е европейска страна и в последните години на.
Thank you very much. Moldova is a European country. Over the past years, it has moved closer to the European Union by signing the association agreement as well as the visa agreement with the European Union. But at the same time, some procedures are underway that are taking it further away from democracy, and this under the influence of Russia. The media and the freedom of the press is now being eroded. We see less and less political journalism. And then there's a call for a reform of the electoral law, which has not been submitted to public oversight and this, or consultation, and this, of course, is a problem. Now, as a shadow rapporteur, I believe that we should not be providing aid to Moldova without certain promises of reform and improvement of democracy in the country. We need to see them fight against corruption and bank fraud, as well as keeping their nominations in line, politically speaking. And so I think that the country and the regions in the south of the country, where there are people who are pro-Russia, should somehow be dealt with, and I think what we need to do is improve our communication with all of Moldova, especially in the south.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kovachev. Mr. Mureșan, 1.5 minutes.
Uniunea Europeană dorește să ajute cetățenii Republicii Moldova.
Thank you very much. Well, the European Union wants to help the citizens of Moldova. We have 146 million euros from the European budget for 2014 to 20. Furthermore, the budget of the European Union for the following year, and as General Rapporteur for this budget, I said that the three Eastern partners who have signed an association agreement with the EU should be a priority for the budget. We are ready to give 100 million extra euros this year to Moldova, provided it meets very clear criteria: combating corruption, combating money laundering, reinforcement of justice, and ensuring that the state is based on the rule of law. These are the reforms expected by the Moldovans. Most of the citizens of this country feel that their country, unfortunately, is going in the wrong direction. So granting aid to Moldova should be something we do, while at the same time ensuring that the country modernizes along with the expectations of its citizens. We've got the report of the European Court of Auditors, which says that European funds granted to Moldova could be used better. Commissioner, on the reform of the electoral system in Moldova, as you said, the Venice Commission is the supreme authority which should make the decision. And I should like to add that I feel that the authorities in Chisinau should be implementing the recommendations of the Venice Commission. So now we come to catch the eye. Colleague Kosvici.
Já jsem velmi pozorně poslouchal debatu, která tu.
Thank you, Chairman. I've listened very carefully to the debate. Mr. Commissioner, on one hand, I wish to support the Moldavian way toward the European Union. We have to support this effort and thus weaken the Russian influence in Moldova. On the other way, the way how the president behaves, he's very pro-Russian. He is for reforms that are very pro-Russian. The government is basically governed by the oligarchs. So yes, I am in favor of financial support, but we should be very, very careful. The reforms that are happening must be evaluated and then ex post can be also supported by our money. And we should support the opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pospisil. Well, that ends the Catch the Eye procedure. And we now give the floor to Commissioner Stylianides for final comments.
Thank you, my dear colleagues, for a stimulating debate. I take that we all agree Moldova has made courageous choice to undertake an ambitious and far-reaching reform agenda. Unfortunately, the reform efforts have not yet led to comprehensive implementation and to the tangible results Moldovan citizens have the right to expect. These efforts have to be continuously sustained, and I can assure you that the EU stands ready to continue providing its support to Moldovan reform path. That is the reason why we have been preparing an annual action plan for 2017, as well as a new EU multi-annual programming 2017 to 2020, the so-called single support framework, that will focus on jointly agreed priorities with a view to strengthen the European visibility and leverage the impact on the citizens. We have every interest in supporting Moldova in its reform efforts, but ultimately it is above all up to the Moldovan authorities and citizens to own the reform process and to carry out the reforms they deem necessary. Federica Mogherini and Johannes Hahn will continue to keep you fully apprised of developments in Moldova, and of course we count on your support to make our efforts towards Moldova a success story. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed, Commissioner. That closes the debate. The next item on the agenda is the report by Mr. Karim, a report on the annual report 2014 on subsidiarity and proportionality. So we begin by hearing the rapporteur. Mr. Karim, you have the floor.